Hello and welcome to a La Trobe Asia seminar, part of our Indonesia in Focus series. My name is Matt Smith and I work for La Trobe Asia here at La Trobe University in Melbourne. I would like to start this session by acknowledging the traditional landowners of the university, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to their people, both past and present. So in today's session, we'll be hearing about welfare to work reform in Indonesia. And our speaker is Dr. Phuc Nguyen, who is a senior lecturer in La Trobe Business School at La Trobe University. Thank you for joining us today, Phuc.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone.
Phuc will be speaking for about 45 minutes, after which there'll be time for some questions from the audience. So if you have any, there's a handy Q&A box, which is down the bottom of the Zoom chat there. Please put it to use and we'll get to it. And on that note, I will mute myself and stop the video and hand you over to Phuc. Phuc, over to you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. And thanks so much, La Trobe Asia, for this opportunity to talk about a work in progress on behalf of our research team. I'm Phuc from La Trobe Business School, and the other research team members, Professor Mark Kusidine from University of Melbourne and Dr. Fadila Putra from University of Brawijaya. Today, I'm going to talk about a new welfare to work program in Indonesia. The program is called Kartu Prakerja program, which was introduced in April 2020, just before the pandemic. So as usual, I'm going to briefly review varieties of welfare to work program. And then I'm going to talk about the research questions of this research methodology, and then some findings from the preliminary analysis of the data we collected. So as you have known, unemployment has devastating private and social costs, not only to the individuals, but to the society as a whole. So unemployment has always been an important policy issue around the world. However, solutions or approaches to solving the problem of unemployment diverge significantly across countries along different dimensions. On the screen is a list of 4 dimensions based on which we are going to classify different welfare to work programs, but please note that this list is not exhaustive. The first dimension is about social assistance or some support that is provided by the government to the unemployed. And as you could see, such kind of assistance, government-funded assistance could range from nothing to unemployment assistance. So what are the differences among this form of assistance? Definitely, for example, like Indonesia until recently, the government didn't provide any unemployment benefits, similar to Vietnam as well. But in some other countries like Australia, we have unemployment assistance, which is tax funded and tend to be universal. That means all registered unemployed are eligible to such kind of assistance, and they could last for, such kind of assistance could last for a quite long period of time. In between these two ends of the continuum is another form of social assistance. It is called unemployment insurance. So with this one, it is not universal, and usually it refers to a system where employers and employees pay some sort of pay-related contributions, and in return for that, they are entitled to some sort of compensation if they lose their job. So with this one, eligibility for the assistance is based on the history of contributions of members, and it essentially creates some sort of divisions between outsiders and insiders. And what we, interestingly, usually the outsiders tend to work in informal economy, which are argued to be further disadvantaged than those who work in the formal economy and have the capacity to make contribution to unemployment insurance. Another criterion we could use to distinguish welfare to work programs around the world is about the extent to which the programs prioritize the demand side or the supply side of the labor market. The differences between these two approaches are mainly based on the conceptualization, the way they conceptualize the problem of unemployment. For the demand side approach, it tends to conceptualize unemployment problem as involuntary and a structural problem. So the measures fall under this approach tend to focus on job creation via, for example, economic growth or boosting consumption. The supply side approach, on the other hand, tend to conceptualize the problem of unemployment as the problem or the fault of the unemployed. So unemployed people under this approach tend to be seen or classified as undeserving poor. So being unemployed is the problem. So the measures introduced under this approach tend to focus on measures to motivate job seekers to improve their employability or to help them to build up the capacity to work or to find work. Around the world, governments or countries deploy both approaches to some extent, which might have different applications for how job seekers are activated. That is the third dimension of that is the third criterion that we could use to classify welfare to work programs. So if you look at the third dimension, you can see in terms of job seeker activation in some countries, participation into employment services or vocational training is voluntary, and job seekers or program participants are subjected to no mutual obligations. That means they don't have any responsibilities to complete. This Indonesia and Vietnam are two examples of this approach. So both countries don't provide unemployment assistance. That means the unemployed don't receive unemployment benefits from the government. But both countries are signatories to the UN Convention 88. So ILO, Convention 88, so they are committed to providing free vocational training and also free employment services to all unemployed people. That's why, they have nothing. They receive no support from the government in terms of unemployment assistance. They are eligible to free services, but they don't have to participate, and they don't have any mutual obligations, or they don't, they just participate and no strings attached. And at the other end, are countries who provide employment services, but among these countries, we could distinguish two approaches to job seeker activation. The first one is passive. It is called passive labor market policies, and the other one is active labor market policies. So under the passive labor market policies, usually job seekers don't have mutual obligations to, and the purpose of this program is mainly to create some sort of safety net for the unemployment when things turn south for them. So they don't have, they are subjected to no to little mutual obligations. But on the other hand, under the active labor market policies, job seekers are subjected to mutual obligations as a condition of the benefit receipt. So if they want to continue to receive unemployment assistance, then they have to complete a certain activities that the government believe that will improve their employability or get them motivated to return to the labor market. And even within this group, the groups, the countries that adopt active labor market policies, we can further identify two approaches to activating job seekers. The first one, it is called thick approach, or thick approach, and the other one is thin. For the first one, they focuses on human capital development. The other one, they focuses on work first. The differences between the two is that for the first one, they tend to focus on tailored support, tailored services, so as to help job seekers to ensure more, higher quality, more sustainable employment. But with the thin approach or work first approach, the emphasis is in getting job seekers off benefit, getting them, pushing them, hustling them rapidly into the first available job in the market. So it is called work first approach. The concept of activation, importantly, is not limited to job seekers only. It is also extended to apply to the service providers of employment services. So in the 1980s, ILO tend to prefer public delivery of employment services, but with the advancement of new public management, and now a lot of countries resort to the phenomenon that is called marketization. So marketization refers to the way to which public authority sponsor or pay for the delivery of certain public services. And there are different forms of marketization have been identified so far in the field of welfare to work. For example, according to Lee et al. In 2001, they identified 4 types of marketization, or it is called institution of acquisition. They are privatization, contracting out, market testing, and voucher system. Gray et al. In 2017, on the other hand, identify grants, purchasing, and vouchers. So with grants, usually it refers to just public money allocation to a certain purpose, certain or specialized services. With vouchers, they are basically documents that entitle the client to a certain government-funded system. So basically with vouchers, the client just bring it to buy some government or tax-funded services provided by the government. With purchasing, it's something in between. And usually in this scenario, the government will pay for a certain output or outcome, and usually it applies to more generalized, to less specialized services as compared to grants. So why are we interested in Indonesia pre-employment card program or the Kartu Prakerja program? So our team have been following welfare to work program in Indonesia for a while. And when this program was launched in April 2022, we immediately realized that this new program represents a major shift in the government's approach to helping job seekers. Before April 2020, Indonesia did not provide any unemployment benefits, but with this program, they include some form of unemployment benefits, as you see on the screen. And like I said previously, in Indonesia, before April 2020, participation in employment services and vocational training was voluntary for job seekers. But with this program, job seekers are subjected to some form of mutual obligation. That means in order to receive benefits from this program, job seekers will have to complete certain trainings, and they have to complete surveys upon exit, upon completion, if they want to receive the amount of assistance listed on the screen. And also, the government aimed to introduce some forms of activation that is applicable to training providers as well. So for this program, the delivery of services is to be contracted out to both public and private providers. And the government aimed to get service providers activated via what is called a 2-layered mechanism. The first component is a centralized quality assurance that is monitored monitored and assessed, are controlled by the government. And the other component is the market competition. That means once the training programs of the service providers are approved, then service providers are expected to compete with one another for job seekers for market share in line with the market principle. And here, the benefit recipients are issued vouchers, so they could go around, they could shop around and choose the training programs that suit their purposes, that suit their job employability or employment ambition. So with this program, excited by the new features of the program, we aim to go out there to explore the narrative underpinning the shift in the government's new approach to addressing the problem of unemployment. And of course, we also we are interested in understanding whether the program reaches the intended targets using evidence from both service providers and program participants. What differentiates our study from some previous studies are that most of the studies so far relied on secondary data. For this program, we go out there, we collect primary data, and primary data for the purpose of this specific study. So we collected data from all three important stakeholders of the program: policymakers, contracted providers, and the program participants as well. We used mixed method for that purpose, semi-structured for policymakers and contracted provider, and the collection is still ongoing. And in December last year, we completed an online survey with program participants, and we received 846 responses. So now let's move to some initial findings from our data analysis. From the interviews with policymakers, we realized that actually this program is not, how can I say, long before the launch in April 2020, the program has been planned for. This kind of welfare to go program had been planned for, but just before the launch, significant changes were made to the current program. So we're interested, so in order to understand the narrative or the drivers of such a change, we decided to compare the design of the initial design of the program and the current design of the program. We compare, identify the changes, and then interview the policymakers about what drove such kind of changes. So on the left-hand side, you will see the focus, the goal of the program, the capacity, was the capacity of training providers. So the program, in the initial design, the program aimed to improve the capacity of training centers, and to encourage people to participate in the program. The government offered a small incentive, $20 per participant, and they aim to target about 2 million participants. The delivery of the services was to be contracted out by a mix of online and face-to-face mode. On the left-hand side, in the current design program, you can see there's a shift from the focus on training centers to job seekers' capacity. Instead of focusing on the capacity of training center, now this program provides the support directly to job seekers. And in this program, some form of unemployment assistance was included that essentially turned the program into a semi-social assistance program. And clearly the number of participants increased significantly from 2 million to 6 million by the end of December in 2020. And the delivery of the program was conducted 100% online. So when looking at the changes here, definitely you can see that the pandemic is a very big driver here. First, it's about mode of delivery, definitely with the lockdown, face-to-face training programs were impossible. Everything, so definitely pandemic is the sole drivers of the change from a mix of online and face-to-face to 100% online. And clearly the increase in terms of participants because eligibility of program was extended to cover not only job seekers, but also those who were impacted by the pandemic. And also we can see the inclusion of employment assistance there was mainly driven by the pandemic as well. But what seemed interesting to us is the shift from training centers capacity to job seekers capacities as the focus of the program. So digging deeper into a little bit into this issue, we found that, according to the policy maker interviewees, it was no secret that such a change was the result of the captain's pick done by the then Prime Minister, who was in the middle of the campaign, election campaign. So the purpose of the change was to attract votes from young job seekers. Another interesting thing when we look at the changes was the fact that despite the pandemic, the focus on training on workforce capacity was not lost at all. And this happened despite a lot of arguments against the use of money for training services. So a lot of arguments from the government officials even, and from the public saying that the money should be, could have been better spent on other purposes in providing direct support to those who were impacted by the pandemic or cash transfer. But still, you can see, as you can see here, 1/3 of employment assistance, 1/3 of the support in terms of financial was still reserved for training services or training related activities. So from this analysis, we conclude that this program or the current design of the program was born out of the intersection of three key drivers. Of course, the outbreak of the pandemic and the government long-term emphasis on the workforce capacity, and also the political ambition of the government as well. Another interesting thing about this program is the experiential approach to policymaking and implementation of the program. What we found is that the government was very proactive, engaged in regular revisions during the implementation. So the program has been subjected to various formal evaluations, and the government always made changes in response to them. They made a lot of changes around eligibility and around training standards, about the tests, about pre-tests, and about the interactions between trainer and learners. And interestingly, they also introduced changes in response to the feedback from social media. On more than one occasion, they improved the training standards when they read some comments on Facebook, on Instagram about the training program. And on the list is just some examples of the decrees or regulations that were introduced since the launch of the program in April 2020. It is very puzzling to us that during this process, service providers were not included, though. That is very much not aligned with what is called experientialist governance introduced by Sabel and Zedlin in 2010. So according to these authors, they said it is very important. Very important to engage with those who are close to the implementation on the ground if an experiential approach is adopted for the purpose of policymaking and implementation. So clearly, service providers are those who are directly delivering the program to the job seekers, but they were not included in this process. That is one of the things that we find puzzling, and we'd like to look a little bit deeper into in our subsequent interview with policymakers and service providers. So from the perspective of policymakers and also from service providers, we found that the program has had another important impact in creating the provider market of training services in Australia, and it creates some sort of market for private providers to engage with the delivery of public services in Indonesia. And according to service providers interviewees, they have accrued multiple benefits by engaging with the program, both financially and non-financially. So as seen on the screen, you can see for one service provider, the market share expanded significantly. For them, usually before the program, they just had 1,000 to 2,000 per year. But thanks to engaging with the program, now they've got 20,000 users. And we interviewed nine service providers so far, and 3 out of 9 haven't got any of their programs approved by the government yet. That means they haven't accrued any benefits financially, but they still see this program as a valuable opportunity for them to improve different aspects of their operations in terms of administrative aspect, legal aspect, or quality or standard of their training program. And another thing about this provider market is that while the government aims to activate service providers via what is called, like I said previously, two-layered market mechanism, the second component, market competitions, hasn't taken yet. And what we observed is that there has been a lot of communication between service providers, and even they support one another to successfully fulfilling the requirement standards of the program management office. That means some form of collaboration between service providers is still happening, despite the expectation of the government for them to compete with one another. And according to service providers, the market is still too big for everyone, and they don't see the need to compete with one another yet. As exciting as the experiential approach to managing program, it causes a lot of problems for the service providers in terms of implementation. So as you could see, a lot of changes were introduced since the launch of the program, and many changes regarding the training standard were even introduced in the middle of evaluation process. So the service providers were assessed based on the former training standards, but then the new one introduced, and they had to redo everything from start. And that's why 3 out of 9 haven't got any training programs approved by the government, even though they engaged with the program since the very, very beginning of the program. And when we conducted the interview, it was December last year. So it means that, nearly 2 years engaging with the program, they haven't got any programs approved. So these are the few things that were raised by the service provider. Now let's see what program participants thought about this program. So according to the program participants, the program seems to be on track. So if you look at that administrative, it was easy for them to enroll, to register for the program. And the program seems to attract the right cohort of participants. A majority of them have year 12 or below education level. This group of cohort is argued to benefit most from participating in the program. And when they choose the course, most of the majority of them, 56.9, make the decision based on the job ambition. That means it is related to employment or employability to some extent. And clearly, all of them aim to achieve some outcome that is employability related or employment related, or some would like to improve entrepreneurship skills so as to open their own business later on post the training program. And the program has been a success story in terms of job seeker activation. Like I said previously, job seekers are subjected to some sort of, subjected to some mutual obligation as a condition of benefit visit. And as you could see here, 100% of job seekers or program participants attended at least some classes that of the program that they were enrolled for. And 100% realized some changes post the training program, either new job or they started a new business. And when asked if the training program is helpful in finding or landing such kind of change, 68% said yes, a lot. And the level of satisfaction is extremely high, with more than 90% of program participants were satisfied or very satisfied with the training program that they undertook. And we even found some positive association between the usefulness of the program and the level of satisfaction, as you could see here, with experiment roles are statistically significant at with a coefficient of 0.404. However, there is one concern that we have, is that with the question, are you working now, either full-time and part-time, there's some gap between the time they completed the training program at the time of our data collection. And then we ask, are you working now? And only 70.6% of program participants said that yes, responded with a yes. That means, we have, 100%. In the previous slide, I said about 100% of program participants realized some changes, but then only 70% were working at the time of data collection. That is a big drop. Of course, the pandemic was still going on, but we are very interested in learning more about this drop because it might be an indication about the sustainability of the outcomes of the program participants post the training program. So in conclusion, when we looked into this program using the primary data that we collected from policymakers, from program participants, and also from contracted providers, clearly it is the first program of its kind in Indonesia. It contains some features that are commonly seen in active labor market policies that tend to be associated with OECD countries. And clearly the program is a successful story in terms of, in terms of different aspects like job seekers activation, developing a training provider market, or timely response to the pandemic by the inclusion of, providing some sort of social assistance, about, being instrumental in generating employment or some changes post the training program. And clearly, another thing is about the experiential nature of the program, which we usually don't see much, which we usually don't see even in Australia. So with Welfare to Work program in Australia, for example, it's kind of it is called quasi market, and usually each program is locked in for a certain period of time, usually from 4 or 5 years. But with this program in Indonesia, the changes were introduced responsively in response to feedback, to formal evaluations quite quickly. The subject so far is seen to be subjected to some limitation from our own perspective. Of course, for now, the sample size for qualitative data is still very modest, 5 with policymakers and 9 with contracted providers. And also, we can't help but realizing very high level of satisfaction, very high level of changes of outcomes to be realized by the program participants post the training program. Just so you know that we had no concerns around the potential that the program participants were under any pressure to give their response in a certain way, because this program represents a one-off opportunity or chance for program participants. That means they're eligible for only one take at the program, and all of the respondents had exited the program at the time of data collection. So what I want to say is that we are not concerned about the biases in terms of responses, but we might, we might question, actually, we are questioning about the representativeness of the sample that we have for the survey data, given the huge number of participants, 6 million by the end of 2020, and of course we are going to have to design the population from which we draw, population with which we conduct the survey before we can make a conclusion about representativeness. But definitely it is one of the concerns that we have to resolve. The other one is about sustainability of employment outcomes. Like I said previously, there's a big drop between the number of the percentage of program participants who realized changes post-training program and those who were working at the time of data collection. It might be the pandemic, it might be something else, who knows? So we are going to look further into this issue as well. So that's it for me. Very brief presentation. Thank you so much.
Hello there. Thanks very much for that presentation, Phuc. That was a very interesting kind of insight into how they're managing welfare to work over in Indonesia. I've got some questions here, but I've also got one question from the audience. Those listening, if you have a question for Phuc, please put it in the Q&A down the bottom so I can read it out. We'll take one first from Peter, though. So he's written here, beneficiaries is listed as around 5.5 million. How many people are unemployed in Indonesia? Are there many homeless and unemployed that are unknown to the government? So just wondering how comprehensive that kind of number is for the population.
I don't have the data about unemployed, the data about unemployed in Indonesia off the top of my head, I couldn't remember. But I just want to clarify that with this program, the target is not only about job seekers, but when the pandemic hit, the government decided to extend the eligibility of the program to include job seekers, of course, and those who were impacted, who lost job because of the pandemic, and they even include those who would like to improve their employability, even if they were working at the point. So the beneficiaries here does not represent, beneficiaries are not limited to unemployed people only. From our previous study in Indonesia, a lot of unemployed people or under-unemployed people in Indonesia were working in the informal economy. There is a big distinction between formal economy and informal economy. So without any unemployment benefit, that means there's no unemployment benefits or no social assistance, then definitely the unemployed people don't see the need to register with the government. And many of them were working in the informal economy or underemployed, and a lot of them were not accounted for by the government. So if I don't have the formal statistics here, but what I want to say here is that there's a difference between eligibility of the program and the unemployed people. And clearly what we see, from our own experience in Indonesia, we see that the government tend not to account for, can't register, tend not to account for all people who are underemployed or unemployed or homeless in the economy because of the lack of unemployment benefit, or because of the difficulty in tracing employment in the informal economy. Thank you so much, Peter, for your question. Does that answer your question?
He can maybe put something in the chat or the Q&A if he wants to follow up there. Can I just ask something in the meantime? You said the focus changed from training centres to job seeker capacity, and that I think you described it as a captain's pick or a captain's call for that to happen. So it maybe didn't go through review or anything like that when it did happen. But it seems like that kind of shift had a good outcome, didn't it? Can you kind of talk about that aspect of it? Because I think if there's a focus on training centres and what and just the fact that they are doing the processes, that it becomes a bit more of a box ticking exercise, and you can get people just put into any employment, whether suitable or not. But if you're focusing on job seeker capacity, that kind of changes that focus of putting people into suitable employment that will work for a better term. Is that kind of thing accurate?
To us, for this program, we're interested in the changes of the program, and what we see, we want to understand the drivers underpinning the changes. But of course, I agree, I tend to agree with you about we don't assess the, the quality or, the right needs or the value of such kind of change. But from my own, my experience in studying welfare to work program in Australia and some other countries, clearly both, training centers and job seekers are both important stakeholders in the system. So here in Australia, clearly we have, a lot of support to, I don't want to say a lot, but we have support available to the unemployed financially, and training programs as well. But from our data, we also see a lot of problems with service providers who are involved in delivering the services to job seekers. So my view is that both aspects are important for a successful welfare to work program. But if, in terms of given limited constraints, the shift, and given job seekers in Indonesia are not entitled and not receiving much support from the government, the shift definitely proved to be beneficial. But that will take away the resources for the training centers, who also have big role to play in the success of any program like this.
So do you think that these changes are going to be implemented long-term as well? Because you've seen that there seems to be a benefit to the way that they've changed, but it was born out of the pandemic. And what do you think is going to be the kind of way that this is run long-term?
So at the time of writing this, writing the draft of the paper, we learned that the government decided to extend the program for a couple of years. And also, in addition to this program, they are going to introduce another program. It is unemployment insurance that was launched in April this year as well. So when we look at that, definitely we can see some overlap in terms of eligibility between the two programs. But the government, Indonesian government, decided to go ahead with both. So with this program, you can see they don't offer, this program doesn't offer the employment services or placement services. There's no placement package there. And with this program, they offer this program unemployment insurance that was launched in April. It has all three components. Some form of unemployment benefits, some form of training programs as mutual obligations, and some employment services as well to help placing job seekers into work. But clearly, eligibility is so much more limited as compared to the current program. And we can't forget that unemployment insurance benefits only last for a certain period of time, very limited period of time, and it is based on contribution history. That means it excludes a lot of people, especially those who work in the informal economy.
And what's going to be the next step of this study then? And where do you hope to take this research direction in the future?
So with this research, we actually have been invited to do some more evaluation of the program, of the unemployment insurance program that was introduced in April. We have, we're going to produce a report from this program, but so we want to finish that report before starting, embarking on the next stage of this project. This project was sponsored by the Ministry of Manpower of Indonesia. So we really hope for continuing relationship with them to do more projects like this in the future.
And is there any different questions that you want to focus on at that point?
For us, for me and other members of the research teams, we're interested in, what we are more interested in is the provider market. We are very much interested in the two-layer activation mechanism. We want to understand how this kind of mechanism influences the behaviors of providers when they are delivering the services to job seekers. It is called frontline. Frontline delivery. That is what we would like to focus on. But clearly, we will have to give it a little bit more thought, because given the very early stage of the development of the provider market in Indonesia, it might pose some challenges for us if we decided to go in that direction. So it is still unclear at this stage for us, but that has been the focus of interest of our research team for a while when we conduct the research in other countries.
Okay, that's all the questions that I've got for you. If anyone has any questions, quickly put them in the Q&A. Otherwise, we're going to call an end to this seminar. Phuc, Nguyen, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us today. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everyone.
And we have one more seminar in the list of the La Trobe Asia Indonesia in Focus seminar series. That will be on patient safety and quality of care in Indonesian hospitals. That's next Tuesday at 2 p.m. AEST. Tell your friends and sign up on our website. Thank you very much, Phuc, and thanks to everyone who attended today. It was great to have you all here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.